UU Women's History Month, we have a true inspiration today. Reverend Olympia Brown spent her life working to create opportunities for women. Olympia was born on January 5th, 1835, to Asa and Lafia Brown. Like Reverend Mila Maynard, another UU of the week, Olympia's family were pioneers, having moved from Vermont to Michigan. We see once again that education for all was a value in her family. Her father was so committed to his children receiving a quality education that he actually built a school on his farm and then asked all of his neighbors to contribute to pay for a teacher for the school. Olympia and her sister desperately wanted to attend college, something that was not usually done for women at this time. The daughters started to enroll at Mary Lyons Mount Holyoke Female Seminary in Massachusetts. Once there, though, Olympia and her sister were very unhappy with the theology of the seminary. At Mount Holyoke, the school's Calvinist views of God did not match up with Olympia's Universalist faith. She left the school and started to attend Antioch College in Ohio. At the time, Horace Mann was the school's president. Her father was so impressed with the college that he actually packed up the whole family and moved everyone to the school so that the rest of the kids in the family would be closer so they could all attend the college. It was at this time that Olympia first got her glimpse of a female minister. She invited Antoinette Brown to preach. Olympia had never heard of a woman minister before and was enthralled with the speaker. She knew that her path was leading her to theological school. Now, remember at this time in history, however, women were not readily accepted into the ministry and were actively pushed out of schools and congregations. Olympia had a very difficult time finding a theological school that would admit her. She applied for multiple schools, but they all said no, and that admitting a woman would be too great an experiment. After multiple rejections, she finally applied to the Universalist Divinity School at St. Lawrence, where the president wrote her a letter that saying women do not belong, but that was between her and the great head of the church, meaning God. While definitely not positive, she didn't take it as a rejection and moved to St. Lawrence to begin school. She entered divinity school in 1861 and quickly finished her courses by 1863. It was at this time that she began her mission to convince people of her ability to do things. She had to convince them to let her enroll in classes. She had to convince the Universalist Church of America to ordain her. And she had to finally convince parishes to hire her. That's exhausting. In 1864, she received her very first parish ministry in Weymouth Landing, Massachusetts. As a minister at Weymouth, Olympia was introduced to radical Unitarian and Universalist women activists like Susan B. Anthony, Lucy Stone, and Julia Ward Howe. These women, along with Olympia, were leading the charge for women's suffrage or women's right to vote. In 1867, Olympia joined the women on a speaking tour of the United States to pass the Women's Suffrage Amendment. As you can imagine, the crowds she encountered were not always pleasant. Often, people, mostly men, would argue with her and yell at her. But Olympia stood firm against these unkind words, and because she was sure that she was on the side of justice for all. In 1870, Olympia took another ministerial position in Bridgeport, Connecticut. The church at the time was failing and on the brink of closing. Again, congregations did not always want women ministers, so often they were sent to congregations that were not healthy. Often women ministers encountered discord among parishioners, financial instability, and general anger towards them in their positions. Bridgeport was no different for Olympia. In 1873, though, Olympia met John Willis. John was like no other man that Olympia had ever met, completely supportive of her career and her advocacy work, loyal and kind. Olympia had found her life's partner. The two were married in 1873 and shortly after had two children, a son in 1874 and a daughter in 1876. Knowing what you know about the rarity of women in the ministry and the general contempt for women pursuing careers, how do you think that the people of the Bridgeport congregation reacted to Olympia getting married and then having the gall to have a baby and wanting maternity leave? Well, the congregation called for a vote to terminate her ministry. While the vote was unsuccessful, Olympia was still not supported in her ministry there. She decided to resign from her position at the Bridgeport congregation in 1874. After taking a few years to reevaluate her calling, Olympia found a new position in Racine, Wisconsin. Olympia set to work with the crumbling Racine church. Within 9 years, though, she had brought the congregation back from the brink of closing, able to sustain itself. It was at this time that Olympia felt called to spend more time fighting for women's suffrage. She left her beloved Racine congregation for part-time ministry work in the larger area, allowing her more time to write and speak in public for her causes. Olympia worked tirelessly to organize statewide and national level events to raise awareness for women's suffrage. Taking the reign of the suffrage movement from Carrie Chapman Catt and Anna Shaw, Olympia, along with Alice Paul and Lucy Barnes, began the Women's Party in 1913. The group used confrontational tactics to bring the issue to the forefront of people's minds and the front of newspapers. Olympia led vigils and demonstrations to mobilize support. In one notable protest, Olympia burned Woodrow Wilson's speeches in front of the White House after he had removed his support from the cause. It was quite a show. When the 19th Amendment was finally passed in 1919, Olympia, one of the original suffragettes, was able to vote for president at the age of 85. Olympia died in 1926. She was buried next to her beloved husband in Racine. Olympia was a pioneer, advocating for the advancement of women in Universalist ministry and society. We are lucky to have her example in our Unitarian Universalist history. To find out more information about the lives of famous Unitarian Universalists, please visit our website, uuoftheweek.org.